So the Illinois State Board of Education requested this study, and they requested it out of a desire to better understand how student learning was changing in the midst of unprecedented disruptions due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
We began the study in the fall of 2020, and it was important to me to really and truly understand the learning gaps, what happened during the time that the students were all in remote learning.
I think it's really important always to look at data, but now so more than ever to find out what the specific needs are that we may have not identified.
This study is called Estimating Changes to Student Learning in Illinois Following Extended School Building Closures Due to the COVID-19 Pandemic.
Before we conducted the study, we know nothing about COVID-19 and how COVID-19 is related to student learning.
So this study sought to answer two key research questions. First, the study wanted to understand in an aggregate sense how student learning in math and reading changed as of fall 2020, following the extended school building closures that started in the spring of 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Second, the study wanted to understand how any changes in student learning as of fall 2020 varied across students and districts. The study examines data on students in grades 3 through 8 from 17 Illinois districts over 5 years. And this includes 4 years prior to the pandemic to measure how student learning changed in fall 2020 relative to the fall terms prior to the pandemic.
Then we ran statistical models to adjust for student level, school level, and district level characteristics to get an aggregate of the learning difference before and post-COVID.
So the main finding of this study is that students in grades 4 through 8 scored lower than expected in mathematics following the onset of the pandemic, and we refer to this as unfinished learning. Across these grades, we found that middle grade students, so those in grades 6, 7, and 8, had more unfinished math learning than those in lower grades, grades 4 and 5. The study did not find any significant changes in learning for any grade level in reading. And then looking more closely at math, we found that in the higher grades, grades 7 and 8, students in special education had more unfinished learning than their peers who were not in special education. And we also found that in grades 6 and 8, English learner students had more unfinished learning in math than their peers who were not English learners.
We came across this term, unfinished learning. That really taps on the idea of loss in learning gain. So you are supposed to learn this much in a school year, for example, but you ended up learning less than what you're supposed to learn. So there's a gap there, and that gap, that's what we call unfinished learning.
So that lets a district know I need to put more resources towards math interventions.
We're utilizing data to identify, we're grouping the students into similar skill deficit groups and using a variety of resources and materials to identify their needs and then support them with experiences in those needs.
Practitioners may really want to focus on identifying and implementing evidence-based strategies and interventions that can accelerate learning in mathematics.
So we're having to close these gaps with additional supports that we're providing for before and after school, additional programs that we've kind of partnered with various companies in order to provide online platforms that students can even take at home if they would like.
One important thing I wanted to point out is that we don't want to overemphasize or overinterpret the findings. So there are many limitations of the study. First of all, the study are based on a very small sample size. As we know that the state of Illinois has over 850 districts, and we are only collecting data from 17 districts.
It's important to note other factors associated with the pandemic may have been causing disruption in their lives that continued throughout the school year. And these factors may have continued to influence their learning. So I think it is really important for us to continue to study this.
We are not trying to make a definite conclusion. What we are doing here is just a very first step of a long journey of understanding how COVID-19 may have an impact or have an association with student learning.
I would like to see this study conducted on a large scale. It really needs to be done on a larger scale nationally. Our state is not the only state that has gone through this traumatic experience for their students. So having a way to capture where and how we should allocate funding is helpful.